Welcome to Theology of the Body with Father Thomas Loya. We just wanted to share with you, Father and I were down in Springfield with some 7th and 8th graders, and actually started off with like the whole deanery, I think, 800 kids in the church doing Theology of the Body, and then we kind of went off to just one church, St. Joseph's, and did the 7th and 8th graders there. And we did some stuff together and some stuff apart. So when Father took the guys and I took the girls, we had each of them say to the other, like he asked the guys, how can the girls help you be better men of God? And then we asked the women, how can the guys help you be better women of God? So this is what these like 7th and 8th graders said. This is what the guys said to the girls to help them be better men of God. This is interesting. He said, be grateful. Like, I guess for the stuff that guys do for us, we're not always grateful, like holding doors, whatever. Loyalty, modesty, and then help us be more religious. Isn't that the insight there? Fascinating. And then the girls said, support us by agreeing with our good decisions. And I think by that they were talking pro-life stuff, because I did a little pro-life talk with them. Stop thinking you're better than us. Okay. Respect our bodies. They also said respect, loyalty, and be trustworthy. And then keep your promises by not getting divorced. I guess maybe somebody's dad initiated a divorce, so they kind of put it on the guys. But yeah, so isn't that great?
And the ones for the guys wanted to leave. Yes. You see, what was amazing, and we didn't prompt them, their answers went right along the lines of what we always teach from the theology of the body, the particular needs of, respective of particular genders. And also there's something that the boys said, which is indicative of what John Paul II says, especially in his on the dignity of women, that document, about how the woman by nature has a more openness to spirituality. And that's, of course, because of her gift of receptivity stamped in the very design of her body, the language of her body. And so the boys were actually saying to the girls, yeah, help us become more. We know you already are like more automatic with that or something. Help us to become more like that, which is precisely what he says in the in his a lot of his work, John Paul II. Those are interesting how the boys knew that. They knew they weren't as natural with it, and they needed the girls' help. They already recognized that kind of wholesomeness, as it were, in the girl, the natural sort of intrinsic wholesomeness or openness to spirituality. So it was interesting how it went. And again, the boys wanted from the girls, which is why I always talk about to married couples and those preparing for marriage. They wanted the girls to give that message. I always talk about how the message that the guys need, the message of adequacy and support, which is precisely how we explain the real meaning of Ephesians 5 about women be subordinate, submissive to your husbands, meaning support them in their mission to love you. And it's precisely what the boys wanted from the girls. So again, and these are just, 14 years old? 14-year-old? Yeah. Wow. 14 now. 8th grade is 14 now. So, welcome. Okay, I'll start this part with a prayer for Lent, since we're still in Lent. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Lord and Master and God, spare me from the spirit of indifference, discouragement, and lust of power. Instead, grant to me, your servant, the spirit of humility, patience, and love. Yes, O Lord and God, grant me the grace to be aware of my sins and not to judge others. For you are holy, our God, and we render glory to you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and ever and forever. Amen. Sorry we had to cancel last month, but we're nice to see everybody back, and for new people too. And both sisters are back, which is always great. I feel more confident that way. and what we're doing is, of course, going through John Paul II's Love and Responsibility, which is it's a very good one to read even before you get into theology of the body, because that's exactly what happened. He did this when he was priest and bishop, these thoughts. and then eventually came to theology of the body. But this is sort of what the sort of the philosophical foundation undergirds all that. And you'll see points in the theology of the body. You'll see some of them in here. You'll see later on how he kind of answers a lot of the questions here with the theology of the body. This is the sort of the philosophy of love in a sense, and the theology of the body is the theology of it, so the theological answers. So I just put up here, I know it's kind of hard to read, but he's talking in this whole, what he's talking about so far, and it's interesting, as I said before, this is, it's going to be fun and kind of providential that as we get into the warmer months, the book is going to heat up as well. It's going to get into some very, he's going to start to get into the nitty gritty of love and relationships and sexuality in ways that if you haven't read it already, it will amaze you, absolutely will amaze you. And but until that, what he's doing is he's going through, as he does in everything, this sort of phenomenological approach, meaning, okay, how do we really, let's talk about how we experience this thing called love. What happens, what's really going on when boy meets girl, girl meets boy, and they have an attraction and so on. And what do they call love? What really is love? What are the elements of it? And just to kind of summarize a few things, he says that we have love. First of all, you come on somebody and into somebody's, you meet somebody. There is a perception there that has to do with the world of the senses and cognition. In other words, what we can know about them, what we see. We look at them, especially how they look, how our initial experience of them. Do they laugh? Do they talk? Whatever. It's a sense-based experience, of course, is the first thing. And then that leaves us then with a certain impression of the person and of the gender too. And that impression then can elicit then an emotion. Oh, I think I like this person. I think I'm having feelings for this person. And that reaction then is a reaction really to the value that we perceive in the person. And that value is, first of all, the value of them as a man, as a woman. In other words, a man looks at a girl, a woman, and starts to become attracted to her, but he's attracted initially to the value of femininity that he sees in her, is experiencing in her, and then vice versa. The woman, if he's attracted, she finds the man attractive, is being attracted to the value of masculinity that she senses in him, especially if it's coming through him in a very balanced way, in a good way. But what he's going to show us there, as we'll get into that today, is that that's okay. That's the process. That's what happens naturally. It's all right. But there's something else, and that is ultimately it has to be, which is going to involve a choice on each person's part, to see the person. The value becomes not just them as a woman, as a man, their femininity and masculinity, but them as a person, first and foremost, and always and above all, because the value of their femininity, their masculinity, will change. In other words, it will over time. It will change. It can be different. It can become disappointing. It can become sort of it can fail us, as it were. And we can idealize about it and so on. So the thing that must remain, and it's really an act of the will, is to choose to see the person, to love them precisely because they're a person first. And this is something that will be picked up in the Theology by later on, especially when he does all of his wonderful work on the Song of Songs, especially that the great line in there, "You have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride." In other words, this person, and this is very important, and when I work with couples, I tell them this, that first and foremost, I just had an experience this week, major crisis of a family, major crisis. Seemingly, how are we going to solve it? Marriage is going to fall apart. Oh my goodness, it seemed a terrible, heart-wrenching crisis. And I said to them, okay, look, this is the time when you really make your faith work here. The first and foremost, what are you? What are the two of you? aside from what's happened here, this major, terrible crisis, what is the truth of the two of you? The two of you, first of all, are Christian brother and Christian sister. Now that's where you start. You don't start with what happened and this terrible thing and all that. You start first and negotiate through this together. The starting point is you as persons. See, this is so valuable pastorally. You know, you can get persons. You see, because what happens, something happens to people in a couple, in a relationship, and they're all over the place. You know, it's emotional reactions and you know, despair and hopelessness and anger and revenge, and it's just everything bad. It's just this unleashing of all this, you know, just like cesspool. You know, it's like emotional fireworks display that went out of control. How do you get all that together and back to base and proceed in a way that's going to be healing and redemptive? Well, the starting point is not the emotion and everything else. That may have been, all this may have been very much a part of that relationship. What you do is you come back to, and your starting point is what should be at the beginning and always to the end and for eternity. Persons. This is a person. How do I relate to a person? Doesn't matter what they did to me. They are a person. Now they also happen to be a Christian person, as I am too. Okay? So how does a Christian person respond? How do the two respond to each other? Next step then is how do you do this in particular if you're Catholic, as Catholic couple. Now once you do that, once you root it there in the person, and particularly the Christian person, anything has the potential to be resolved and redeemed. But if you don't, that's when it gets all haywire and hopeless and so on. And that's going to be the big point here. It's that I love you, first of all, just because you are a person, and the only honest way, or the only honest reaction to a person is love, and a responsible love, which is why it's called love and responsibility. You start there, and you kind of stay on that track, and what will proceed from there will be very redemptive. If you don't, it's hopeless. All right, so let's go. Oh, one more thing up here. There's three, basically then, to sum all this up, there's three ways we respond or experience attraction. In the sensual, our senses, in other words, that person looks beautiful. There's something about them I find attractive. That, as he'll explain, it tends to be a little more, the guys tend to process things that way initially, more so. The girls, a little more so, lean towards sentimentality, in other words, feeling. How do I feel about this person? Both of those, again, are valid reactions, valid ways to process attraction. But the problem is that many relationships stay there, and they proceed ahead from those two levels. What he's going to talk to us about today is, no, the key is to go past that to what's called an integrated love. Integrated love. Not a love that is just an essential attraction or a sentimental attraction. It's not about being attracted to their body, as it were, or their physicality. That's part of it, he said. It definitely is part of it. Or your feelings towards them. That's part of it. But you can't. It can't stay there. And that's what a lot of. I was talking one time to a couple who've been married a long time, and now they're grandparents and happily married. Great family life, great grandchildren, wonderful practicing Catholics, and In fact, one of them is even a deacon. And just in conversation, they were thinking back on their marriage and so on, and they said to me, they said, yeah, we have to admit that when we got together, a lot of our attraction was physical. In other words, they liked each other from that standpoint. That's what started the relationship. So it brought them together. And that's okay. The Pope's saying it's part of it. It's okay. It's just that, and obviously for them, it grew. It grew into a very integrated love. They had to move way beyond that, and the hope is that a mature couple with grace, and by attending classes like this, will in fact move beyond that, because it's very natural, it's very understandable. Many relationships do start that way, but we need to move beyond it, and the hope is that they would. But you need grace and so on. So many relationships do not, and then that's why down the line they have trouble. So this is all about what love really is. Remember, it's walking through, and I call it the age zone, the honesty zone. What we throw these words around today. It's really a war of words is what we're in. It's a war of words, and we have to take back the words. And he taught us how to do it. And we're warring now about the word love. What is it really? Okay. So we want to get to integrate. So in fact, that's going to be called the problem of integrating love. This is we left off on page 114 in your books from St. Ignatius Press that can be gotten exclusively here at Daughters of St. Paul.
Only place.
It's the only place you should get it. All due respect to all other outlets. Okay. On 114. Now he calls this the problem of integrating love. You'll notice he'll use the word problem a lot, but problem, especially from I think European thinkers like him, problem really means an issue, a theme. It's not like something's wrong. It just means like something we have to work through here.
In philosophy, everything's a problem.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Everything's a problem. Yeah. Again, it's always about words. Okay, and there's some really great stuff in here. I mean, like this is really. I hope we can get through a lot of it today, because, like I said, this book is really gradually ratcheting up, and there's some great stuff. You have to kind of slog through some of the philosophical stuff and all that, but you really need to. And then he even says at the end of this chapter, hopefully we'll finish this chapter today. At the end of this chapter, he even says that, well, actually, as he ends this, hopefully where we'll end today, he even says, so now we're going to apply this into the lived experience. Okay, but he has to lay the foundation, and that is very critical. Even a lot of times when I give talks on theology about life, people are, okay, well, how do you, sister, when we've done some venues, they'll often ask me, okay, how do you want to do it? How much time do you need, whatever. Usually my answer is, I kind of need 2 sessions, usually at least 45 minutes or an hour apiece. Ideally, if I could have that kind of time. Because you have to lay a foundation. You can't just launch into all the questions and answers and application, because it won't make sense. That's part of our problem today. You have to lay the foundation, which gives you the why. It gives you the terminology. It kind of sets your mind, gets your mind set in the right direction to think along the right lines. Then you can go into the other, the specifics. So there's a little bit of patience that's needed to kind of grind it out at the beginning, but you'll see it really pays off. And that's what's missing. The why is what is missing. Once you have the why, you're home free. It's smooth sailing after that. People don't understand church teaching or reject it, or they're in the trouble with their lives because they don't know, weren't given the why. When you know the why, you can't reject the what. You can't. When people reject or don't understand something about church teaching, what it really is, they don't know the why. Okay, so the why is the foundation here. Okay, 114. Looked at in terms of psychology, love can be seen as a specific situation. It is on the one hand an internal situation existing in a particular subject, and is simultaneously a situation between 2 persons, a woman and a man. But whether we think of it as of its internal or its external aspect, it is a concrete situation, and therefore unique and unreproducible. The external correctness and uniqueness of the situation which we call love is closely connected with its internal aspect, with what is within each of the persons, who are, as it were, actors in the drama of their own love. Love is certainly a drama, in the sense that it is made up of happenings and of action. Love is a happening, right? To do, to act, is the meaning of the Greek word drao, which means drama. Thus, the dramatis persona discover the plot of this drama in themselves, perceive their love as a psychological situation unique of its kind and one of great and absorbing importance in their inner lives. A person is, of course, among all the varied objects of the visible world, that unusual one which is endowed with an inner self of its own and is capable of inner life. Okay, so a lot of it's going to have to do with the inner life. Psychology, which is, as its name indicates, the science of the soul, endeavors to lay bare the structure and the foundations of man's inner life. Its investigations serve to confirm that the most significant characteristic of that inner life are the sense of truth and the sense of freedom. Very important words now that have been commandeered by the world. We've got to take them back. Truth is directly connected with the sphere of cognition. Okay, human cognition does not consist merely in reflecting or producing mirror images of objects, but is inseparable from awareness of truth and falsehood. Okay, in other words, when we think, we process things. The human way of doing it, as humans, we just don't mirror things back to act on instinct. We actually process something in terms of an ethical system, a right and wrong, what is true, what is not. Okay, a couple of sentences down. But awareness of truth and falsehood lies together outside the boundaries of that which matter can furnish. Truth is a condition of freedom, for if a man can preserve his freedom in relation to the objects which thrust themselves on him in the course of his activity as good and desirable, it is only because he is capable of viewing these good things in the light of truth, and so adopting an independent attitude to them. Without this faculty, man would inevitably be determined by them. 115, about halfway down the first paragraph. Okay, further down the last sentence in that first paragraph on 115. Man's ability to discover the truth gives man the possibility of self-determination, of deciding for himself the character and the direction of his own actions. And that is what freedom means. Okay, as we're going to see, freedom just doesn't mean, as they thought erroneously in the days of the sexual revolution of the 60s. All you too young to remember that. I remember it well. Don't smile. You're too young to remember the sexual revolution. I remember when it hit. The sexual revolution hit the 60s. And I think any parent who was a parent of teenagers during the 60s should be canonized, because they were blindsided by a phenomenon that was the likes of which we never saw before. And these parents had to go from leave it to beaver to having a kid that was sex, love, and rock and roll overnight. And they were totally unprepared for that. Yeah, yeah, the pill had a lot to do with it. Things move evolutionary. There's foundations that are laid, and actually some of this, well, it goes all the way back to the beginning, but in terms of more recent history, certainly the world wars had something to do with like the Second World War, because there was a dehumanizing, first of all, of humanity during the 20th century. And then the World War II sent women into the workplace and started then to change that whole thing for them, of womanhood, and they started to they take on the jobs of men and so on, and they became more independent financially, and then they wanted to stay with that, and then along came the pill. So it was an evolutionary thing, but it did spike in the 60s, and it was all this yeah, junk science, yeah. Serious sexual studies, and they weren't serious at all. The other thing too is you have to be careful, and this is my message to all those who would fancy themselves, because I don't like to use labels, but people sometimes do, they so-called conservative Catholics, or very conservative, whatever that means. Okay, I don't use those terms. We have to be careful of that, because part of the sexual revolution was a reaction. Always remember the You know, the pendulum principle. If you're here, you inevitably produce this over here. If you're over here, you will inevitably cause this over here. Now, prior to the 60s, we were on kind of lean towards the one side, and that would be the sort of the Victorian prudishness. You know, you can talk about sex. You know, you can talk. You know, everything was a sin, everything was wrong, and you know that. Okay. Well, there was like Christopher West talks about when he refers. And this is what he means when he refers to Hugh Hefner. When he said that Hugh Hefner was right in a manner of speaking, meaning Hugh Hefner. And again, he's symbolic, not that he's some grand wizard. He's just a symbol for Christopher. He symbolizes a lot. He knew that this side, there was something wrong with this side. Sex wasn't, how could something so wonderful be so bad and dirty and unmentionable and a sin all the time? So he rebelled against that. He and, of course, the sexual revolution came in and they said, okay, we're going to go this way. Now that until he was wrong. Okay, he was right about, yeah, this isn't correct, but this isn't correct either. Okay. So what happened in the 60s in part was a reaction to what was this. And you have to be very careful as we're trying to regain, rightfully so, what is correct about Catholic theology and spirituality and purity and modesty, that we don't do this again, because you will produce this. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. We have to be very, very careful about this. Because we will predict. You have to know, always see history, understand history. So that was part of it too. Remember, at the 50s and before that, you just didn't talk about sex, and most of things having to do with sex were sin. Was about just sin. And so there was something, as part of the centuries of Manichaeism and all that. And so there was a rebellion against it. But the rebellion had its problems too. Okay? That's why Theology came in to get us, instead of going here and here, it's here. Okay, it's here. It's in the integrated love. This is disintegrated, that's disintegrated. Okay? Strict, rigid, so-called arch-conservative Catholic is not integrated. As a priest, I can tell you, and those listening, listen carefully, as a priest who counsels and sits in confessionals, yes, I do so also with people very disintegrated who come from very staunch, conservative, magisterial Catholic families. They can quote that catechism backwards and forwards. But I can tell you, there are many who are sexually very disintegrated in spite of all that. And the answer is here. It's in integrated love. Not here, not here. And that's the genius of Catholicism. It's in the both and. It's in the both and. Both sides have something right about them. Both sides, There's a piece of this that was right. There's a piece of this that's right. Now you put the two together and you've got it. See? All right. Naturally, I also counsel and hear the confessions of people who were a product of the sexual revolution as well. Equally sexually disintegrated. Okay. So the extremes, the poles, will leave us disintegrated. Okay. Equally disintegrated. Okay. So it's in the integration. We have to be careful. I know we're well intended. We want to clean up a lot of stuff, but you got to be careful because you'll produce the other side. Okay. So, okay, truth. Let's go down 115 towards about halfway down that paragraph on 115. When it is connected primarily with the body and exhibits a distinctive propensity to use the other person for enjoyment, the subject's feelings are dominated by sensual desire. When, on the other hand, a sexual value as the content of an experience is not primarily connected with the body, the emphasis shifts in the direction of sentiment, and desire does not obtrude on the foreground. This experience may take any one of an enormous number of forms, according to the distribution of emphasis in the response to the sexual value. Each such form is strictly individual because it takes shape in a specific interior and also in a specific external conditions. The dominant psychic energies will decide whether we have to do with a violent affection or with passionate desire. Okay, that's another one of those pendulum things. Is it all about feeling? Or is it all about passion, desire, and bodies? Okay, neither one is going to give you the love. Now, the big zinger comes down on page 116, second paragraph, halfway through. We'll read that whole paragraph. Second paragraph on 116. These are the salient characteristics of love in its subjective aspect, and it is in this form that it always constitutes a concrete situation internal to a human being, unique and unrepeatable. At the same time, however, it aims not only at integration within the person, but at integration between the persons. The Latin word integer means whole, so the integration means making whole. The endeavor to achieve wholeness and completeness. The process of integrating love relies on the primary elements of the human spirit, freedom and truth. Now we're going to go into what freedom and truth really is. Freedom and truth and freedom determine the spiritual imprint and marks the various manifestations of human life and human activity. Now I'm going back to my pendulum. The 60s revolution was all about freedom, right? Now the conservative reaction to that is about truth. What does the church say? You know, what's the catechism? What's right? You notice what he says here? It's not there, and it's not here. It's truth and freedom. Most important word in the English language is and. Both and. That's the hardest thing for us in Western civilization to do, is to think, live, breathe, see in an integrated both and fashion. And that is the truly Catholic way. Is the Eucharist the body and blood of Christ? Is it also bread and wine? Aha. And, right? It's the body and blood of Christ, but the bread and wine, there's a value that is still there in it, right? Still exists, right? Okay, so it's both and. And you can't separate them out. We don't know. It's a mystery. Is God God? Spirit, divine? Or Jesus Christ? Was Jesus Christ God? Was he man? Could somebody please explain that to me? Come on. What, is he either God or is man? He can't be both. Yes, he is. And yes, it is a mystery. To be lived, explained to some extent, yes, but never totally. Okay, so think of and. Everything is and. It's this and that and that. Okay, freedom and truth, bottom of 116. Freedom and truth and freedom determines the spiritual imprint which marks the various manifestations of human life and human activity. They penetrate the remotest recesses of human action and experience, filling them with a content of which we never meet the slightest trace in the lives of animals. It is to this content that love between persons of different sexes owes its special consistency. Okay, top of 117. Love is always an interior matter, a matter of the spirit. To the extent to which it ceases to be an interior matter, a matter of the spirit, it also ceases to be love. What remains of it in the senses and in the sexual vitality of the human body does not constitute its essential nature. The will is, so to say, the final authority in ourselves, without whose participation no experience has full personal value, or the gravity appropriate to the experience of the human person. The value of the human person is closely bound up with freedom, and freedom is a property of the will. It is love, especially, that demands freedom. The commitment of freedom is, in a sense, its psychological essence. Okay, now here goes a great line. This is on 117. That which does not derive from freedom, that which bears the marks not of free commitment, but of determination and compulsion, cannot be acknowledged as love, lacks its essential character. Therefore, the process of psychological integration, which accompanies sexual love within a person, involves not only commitment of the will, but unconditional commitment of the will. Demands that the will should commit itself in the fullest way possible and in a way proper to itself. A really free commitment of the will is possible only on the basis of truth. The experience of freedom goes hand in hand with the experience of truth. The experience of freedom goes hand in hand with the experience of truth. The freedom that the 60s revolution thought it would bring, and our concept of freedom, doing whatever we want, don't tell me what to do in my bedroom, brings us what? Enslavement, doesn't it? It brought us the enslavement of what? Of broken marriages, broken families, abortion, contraception, teenage pregnancy, STDs, HIV, clergy sex abuse scandal, breakdown in vocations. I could just go on and on and on. This so-called freedom unleashed a veritable cesspool of misery upon the world. Why? Because it wasn't grounded in truth. It is truth that in a sense restricts in a good way. Truth makes freedom possible. True freedom possible. In other words, we're only free to truly enjoy love and all the good effects of love. You know, close relationship, wonderful families, children, lots of vocations, good vocations. All that comes from what? Yeah, a true, in other words, a disciplined freedom. We have the freedom to enjoy infinite blessings only because truth comes in as the parameter to the freedom. Being an artist myself, I really like Chesterton says, and they should read Chesterton, especially Orthodoxy, his book Orthodoxy. He's a master of the both and. He's a modern day mystic. He should be canonized. I'm trying to promote his canonization actually in my own way. I want to paint the icon of him with a cigar down his mouth. 300-pound man with cigars on a cane. That's going to be my icon. He said that like for instance an artist. He says the artist isn't restricted by a canvas. It's only and has a limit to it. That limitation is what enables him to create freely. But let's say he had no limitation. The canvas goes on for infinity. What could he do? It would just be this big, huge, intimidating. There's no boundary to it, nothing. It's actually the restriction of the canvas itself, X amount of size, that enables the freedom of creativity to happen. Okay, 117, the second paragraph. A really free commitment of the will is possible only on the basis of truth. The experience of freedom goes hand in hand with the experience of truth. Okay, down at the bottom, 117. Love, however, also insists on objective truth. Only thanks to this, only on this basis can the integration of love take place. As long as you consider only in light of its subjective truth, we can obtain no full picture of it and can say nothing of its objective value. But this at last, after all, is what matters most. Is this that we shall try to bring up by means of the ethical analysis of love. Okay, now we do another chapter. Okay. All right, so talk about experience and virtue. Our world tends to emphasize as he says in the last line of the first paragraph on 119, tends to emphasize, or he says proclaim, the primacy of experience over virtue. Now, this is something John Paul II really knew about the world today, something we need to really know. That's why he took that phenomenological approach, because he figured out I can beat them at their own game. The game of the world, the modern world, is what matters is not what you tell me. I don't care if you're the Pope. It's what I experience, what is real to me. You know, what I feel. And so this is where John Paul II went. In his whole life, his whole priesthood, all his writing, his thinking, he went into that experience. But on the bottom 19, at the same time, however, the view described above contains a false conception of freedom. It has already been said that freedom of the will is possible only if it rests on truth in cognition, in other words, knowing what is right. This is where the concept of duty comes in, for it is a man's duty to choose the true good. It is indeed duty that most fully displays the freedom of the human will. The will ought to follow the true good, but this ought to implies that it may equally well not do so. Situationism and existentialism, which reject duty allegedly in the name of freedom, thereby deny themselves any real understanding of free will, or at any rate of that which most fully reveals it. For the freedom of the human will is most fully displayed in morality through duty. Most people think morality restricts free will. 120, top of 120. But duty always grows out of the contact of the will with some norm. Hence, one should look for the complete integration in love not on the terrain of psychology itself, but in ethics. Where love between man and woman is concerned, we must admit two meanings of the word love. Two meanings of the word. Love can be understood as a certain situation with a psychological significance, but also has an ethical significance, and so is connected with a norm. The norm in question here is the personalistic norm. Personalistic norm, that's the key. Okay, down at the bottom of that second paragraph on 120, the last word, sentence. In other words, love as experience should be subordinated to love as virtue. So much so that without love as virtue, there can be no fullness in experience of love. See, we flip-flop it. We say, no, it's not what you experience that's the most important, that trumps virtue. The expression of that would be, with contraception. Who's the church telling me what to do in my bedroom? This is what we experience, so that we know it's between us two. That's it. So that leaves out the virtue. And what he's saying here, no, is flip-flop it. What comes first is the virtue, which will then allow for a richer personal experience. You get it? That's where the real freedom comes in, is by the virtue of value. Okay. Without the virtue, there's no real experience of love, which is why so many people are hurting today. They want it to be just about their experience and not the virtue.
When you move into the plane of virtue, you really are expanding your relationship beyond yourself.
Right, and that's, he's going to pick that up. That's exactly what the point he's going to make there. He gets the whole, he got this great principle of reciprocity, the whole science of reciprocity relation, but which we're going to get into, and that's exactly what he's going to be saying. Actually, he's going to be saying that we find ourselves, in a sense, by investing ourselves in the other. It's almost like we find our full I in the other.
I think, I don't know how well that experience, putting the love experience first, and then we'll figure out our own virtue is working.
Yes.
Because AOL has been doing really interesting articles lately. I don't know who else is on AOL, but this thing about like depression after sex.
Yeah, I saw that. Yes.
Huge problem now that people can't figure out why. So
right.
Whether they're married or not, it doesn't
like
specify what type of relationship, but there's a huge problem where people are not feeling fulfilled. Right after sexuality, and it's like, so something must be going on there with all the techniques and all the toys and everything. It's not working.
That's because they don't allow smoking anymore.
So, so the experience should be speaking loudly and saying, okay, our experience is not working.
Right. And I saw that. I was reading on my radio program, so it's interesting because the one I just downloaded this morning too is about 10 ways to be more sexually fulfilled or whatever. I look at it because I see, okay, what's the world saying? Is there some truth? And but see what they're not saying in those articles is, at least not clear enough, is just as you're saying, sister. What is your experience of lovemaking? Is it within the context of marriage? They just kind of make it generally, just like as if you could, people have sex however, whenever, and not taking into consideration that the context in which you're experiencing it might have something to do with whether you're depressed or not afterwards. They did cite like, well, if they had some kind of sexual abuse prior in life, it could contribute to it too. Yeah, but there's a lot more to it than that. Yeah, you're right. They come out with a lot of these,
Ariana Huffington is now in charge of AOL News. Just so you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Personally responsible. Huffington Post. But it's a very liberal point of view. So who bought who? AOL bought the Huffington Post, and so now that's why he's AOL. But there's an honesty there, though. And they're saying they don't know why. But they weren't prescribing anything. They're just saying we don't know why this is happening, but it's happening. So I think that's good. They're one of the 5 big media moguls in the world. They're all there's 2. I mean, there others are coming in. I just was reading that too. But I didn't finish the book. But I don't know. I mean, AOL, as you know, is very trying, but they own a lot of other media. Yeah, AOL.
Okay. Okay, he's going to start on the affirmation of the value of the person. We'll go to page 122. Now this is going to be a good one when it comes to I love you because. Okay. The value of the person, top of 122. The value of the person as such must be clearly distinguished from the particular values present in a person. You get that? The value of the person as such, not just the values in the person. These are either inborn or acquired and are linked to the whole complex structure of human existence. These values, as we have seen, find expression in love between man and woman. The psychological analysis of love has already shown this. The love of man and woman is based on an impression. Here comes this list here I have on the board. Is based on an impression accompanied by an emotion and always having as its object a value. In the given case, we have to do with a sexual value, since the love of man and woman originates in the sexual instinct. This sexual value may be attached to a whole person of the other sex, or it may be more especially identified with that person's body as a possible object of use. The value of a person is bound up with the whole being of the person and not with his or her sex. Sex is only an attribute of that being. That being so, every person of the opposite sex possesses value in the first place as a person, and only secondarily possesses a sexual value. Now, this is one of the premises to try to explain where the church is coming from on the whole same-sex issue, and why we don't use terms like homosexuality, gay, and all that. You are a person, first and foremost. Secondarily, yes, your personhood is expressed and lived out in terms of a gender. But you first are a person. And again, the only honest, appropriate response to a person is love, real love. So this is why we don't accept. Someone says, "Oh, I'm gay." So, no, you're not. You're a person. Being gay doesn't define you. You're a person first. Now we can talk about how you might have what you believe is a quote-unquote sexual attraction to the same gender. Notice I didn't say why you're gay. We got into that before. We'll go into it later, but it's a way of trying to understand where the church is coming from. It's right here in this line. We are a person first, and secondarily, we possess a sexual value. Okay, on top of the bottom of page 122, the last sentence, and it'll go into the top of 123. It is that awakens the need for the integration of sexual love and demands that the sensual and emotional reaction to a human being of the other sex be somehow adjusted to the knowledge that the human being concerned is a person. Okay, so how you're reacting to them, how you're Your emotional and sensual reaction. I like you. I find you beautiful. Fine. But it has to be adjusted to the knowledge that aside from all that, which is all fine, this is a person. How to relate to them as a person. I cannot objectify them. I can't just use them. I must respect them. I must do what's best for them. You know, don't you think, would this dramatically change dating? What we know is dating, which is another whole issue that we need to look at. Because so much of quote-unquote dating is more like appropriating. In other words, I see, I like, I want, I take, until I no longer like it. Where's the person in this? It should be, I see, I like, it's okay, but this is always in front of my eyes, like the carrot in front of the horse. Person, person, person. So if there's something I don't like so much, I'm not so attracted, I still treat them as person, which means I don't use them and then dump them. Use them and dump them. That's basically what defines marriage. Or, I mean, dating today. It's like mock marriage. It's rush into intimacy to use and consume the person, and when you're done, you dump them. One or the other gets dumped. And that's why there's all this hurt. Talking to someone recently, it's a big factor. And a lot of the, more so with the young ladies, because again, theology of the body, they're constructed for relational integration and so on. There's a lot of hurting single women, young single women today. And what they do is they get into a relationship. It's hurting men too, but more so women. They get into a relationship and they want very much for it to be intimacy and you know, an intimate relationship. They want it to head towards marriage. And they kind of relate as though it is. Now the man, by nature, physiologically, is less inclined to think that way or to act that way. So comes the point in the relationship where it looks like it's not really going to go towards marriage. And she's hurt. She's brokenhearted. The reason is because they inadvertently set themselves up for the hurt by the way that they date.
Father, I talking with my niece who's in her 20s. She has this, she and her friends, they can't fathom the concept of going out with different guys. You know, like
Yeah.
when I was a teenager, I used to date different
Yeah.
people on different occasions.
Right.
It's like if you're going to go out with somebody, it's exclusive from the beginning.
Yes.
And it seems like that's even right.
Sister Helena, when we were in Springfield, you know, before we went down, when I met with the people I always like to get briefed. I just like to know, tell me, who am I talking to? What's the situation? And what are the particular things, maybe, you know. And one of the things that they talked to me on, one of the big things was exactly this, sister, that about this idea of how they date. And they talk, you know, here's 13, 14, 15-year-old girls and guys, mostly the girls, talking in terms of, he cheated on me. And my ex, they call them my ex. Yeah. Where does that language come from? That language, cheating, my ex, it comes from married people. And their parents, if they got divorced because they were doing that or whatever, because they approach it that way and they can't conceive otherwise.
She was disgusted at the very thought.
Yeah. And so they come to me, and it's brokenhearted. They want to commit suicide, they're cutting, you know, all that stuff. Okay. Why? Because my ex cheated on me. Well, first of all, he can't be your ex, and he can't cheat on you. So you can be happy. Wasn't that easy? 5 minutes. Bye-bye. They're like, what? You know, yeah, you are cutting, you are hurting, because you set you up in a situation that was not, quote unquote, my favorite word, honest. So now you hurt when that fell apart. He did not belong to you. There's nothing that, even though you thought that wanted that, even if you agreed to it, there was nothing that binds you together other than marriage, and second to that would be actual betrothal or engagement. Now, are you wearing an engagement ring? Either an engagement ring or a wedding ring are the only two things on earth that can possibly justify you using the term cheating or X. Other than that, when you're cheating, the key word is exclusive relationship. You cannot. An exclusive relationship is a fantasy. It does not apply. But they live it like it does. So what happens when it blows up? Inevitably, it's hurt. That's why this has to be required reading in all high school and junior high school classes. See, we should wipe out dating. Just stick to courting. Courting means both want to be married. They're looking for marriage. Boy sees girl, girl sees girl. A guy says, "This is the girl I'm going to marry. I hope to marry, intend to marry. So may I have your daughter's hand? Blah blah blah. We'll court, and I know I get married." But other than that, it's play the field, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, be open to relationship, to brother sister relationship. Meaning, but don't date. What does dating mean? How do you define dating today? What defines it? What are the boundaries, the parameters of the word dating? It means exclusive relationship. They say, "Oh, I'm dating someone." Like this one woman said to me, young lady, kind of brokenhearted in a relationship. She said, and just casually said it as she was talking to me. She just said, and I reminded her as she's talking. I said, "Wait, back up. Did you hear what you just said a moment ago?" She's saying, "Yeah, this, dating him. I wanted to move towards marriage, and we talked about that. Maybe would all that. And then he's talking to these other girls. I mean, don't these other girls know that he's not single?" You see that? She said that. And I said, "Ooh." I said, "Wait." And I let her talk about that. I said, "Back up. Did you hear what you just said?" And she just said, just casual, like it was nothing. It was so automatic. And I said, "He's single. He was single. And so are you." Yes.
One thing that may emphasize thinking that way is Facebook.
Really?
You can, when you first join, you're single, and if you're married, you can declare yourself married, or you can declare yourself in a relationship. But it's no longer single. Yeah.
Oh, really? Really? That's what they do in declares.
You're single, you're married, or in a relationship. There's probably some more categories too. It's complicated. But when people break up, they go from in a relationship back to single.
Is in a relationship sort of a perverted form of my both and? Yeah.
She's going out. I mean, she's committed in this kind of committed dating relationship. He lives in Louisiana. He is a graduate student at Duke in North Carolina.
Yeah, I know.
And just,
and they got to make sure they're not cheating on each other.
Exactly. You can bring back, I think, like going steady. Like if you decide it's going to be exclusive or something. People have asked me to go teach teens how to date, and I have never dated in my life. God taught me officially, and I entered it. And then I was like, no, why don't you get some married couples or engaged couples or dating? And then I started to read like all the studies and realize, and talking to my own niece, and then realizing they're not dating, or they don't know how to, or they're afraid to, or we've lost the tradition of how you do it if it's not passed on, and they want to do it, but they're afraid of it. So I'm like, wait a minute, I probably do know more about dating than they do. So how are people going to be able to start from marriage if they don't have a lot of relationships together and know around it? You can't just go into a city with that person and then that's a good point. I think dating is a very healthy thing, and it has to be restored on an honest level so that you can go out and have a back, and all those things are changing because of our culture and maturity. How people raised in fifth grade, I'm going to dance. And then high school was always a dance. Roller skates, ice skating. I had a riot, wonderful high school memories. And I always had my mother waiting up for me when I came home. So even if she said 12 o'clock and I wanted to go out and I was just again going to go shopping, we were going to go to work, I had to call and say, "What am I going to do?" And so I had to go home, forget the order, I had to go home. And I had responsibility, accountability, my mother never went to me. And that was the tradition of dating.
Yes.
Was that way of dating?
Right. Right.
Brought back and supposed to still remember how to do it.
Yeah. See.
I think it was a whole way. And then she'd say, "Well, did you kiss him?" "Well, handle it." She's like, and that would be all the time. I was having 16.
Well, see, the like you're saying, dating back then, man, that's what should be restored. How we do it now should be wiped out and restored too. Dating meant being free to be with any guy, just meeting and enjoying each other in this way, not the exclusive.
My mother had arranged it. I can't visit him. He told me like we're heading toward divorce or want to get divorced. And a lot of what they say is, this is the first guy I knew. Like I just married, he overwhelmed me, and because I was young, and so, well, that's still not an excuse, but at the same time, maybe it would have been better if they had, sister, it's very difficult for a woman to stand up to possessiveness of a man. They react strong, and women say they'll find too long in time, and you feel like, I don't have any rights, and I am exclusive, I have no choice, and maybe the woman doesn't understand her rights, it's very hard. And some of them like that. In spite of, not liking it, they like it. If it doesn't work, you'll get hurt. And it feels like you're already, you can't pull away from that. You're so possessive and strong. And even in our women's birthdays, women still want that. You know what I mean? Like that's just, so many women who knew he was controlling possessive, but they loved it. I think it's like they love that feeling of love me so much and relative to me. You know?
Yeah.
You want to be stuck and you remember how to pull out of it and go on forever. How George was upset that he was dating. His mother always gave it up to her and he was just trying to get it back. And now it formed her opinion how good she could be. And when I was down the base in Iron Forget, signing words in Iron Rock, my mother would say something to me about the people I was dating. I thought she knew more about their family, but she was also very wise in telling me something that I could teach from. You know, but those things were kind of and she was definitely people parents today are afraid to get they're afraid to get loud. No, they don't want to be confrontational. They don't want to be or also it's the generation that didn't date. They just kept up. So there's that whole thing of like when we take drugs, we can't tell our kids not to do drugs. We have sex before marriage, so we don't know what to tell our kids.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's something you tell them you made mistakes, you can share that with them, and tell them wish you had done it, you know. Yeah.
Okay, on page 123, that first paragraph, the last sentence of that first paragraph, to kind of sum up this point. If love is not instinct with this affirmation of the value of the person, it is an unintegrated love, and properly speaking, not love at all. Though the reactions or experiences concerned may have the most amorous, erotic character possible. Oh, but we really, really feel it. We really love each other. Well, yeah, 123, page 123. This is particularly true, this is the second paragraph, 123. This is particularly true of love between man and woman. Love in the full sense of the word is a virtue, not just an emotion, and still less a mere excitement of the senses. This virtue is produced in the will and has at its disposal the resource of the will's spiritual potential. In other words, it is authentic commitment of the free will of one person, the subject, resulting from the truth about another person, the object. Now, on page 124 at the top, just to emphasize it more, halfway down the first, the top paragraph there. As we know, this feeling, which relies heavily on an emotional response to femininity or masculinity, may in time fade in the emotional consciousness of a man or woman if it is not firmly tied to affirmation of the person, that specific person to whom the man owes his experience of femininity or the woman her experience of masculinity. Okay, on page 125 at the top, he makes an interesting point about why, another reason why this is important. The first paragraph on 125. The other direction in which affirmation of the value of the person may lead is towards the choice of one's principal vocation in life. A person's vocation, as a general rule, involves another person or persons in his or her life. For sisters, for me, it's persons, right? Not a person. I mean, it's Christ, of course, but it's persons. So these two sisters here are what they are because they see life, they see human beings first as persons. And so they have made a choice to love the persons, precisely because they are persons as such. And because they are so capable of love, one person wouldn't be enough for them. The sisters here are too much for any one man. Okay, 125, the next section. Membership of one another. Now this is going to get really interesting. Some really neat points here. In the metaphysical analysis of love, it was stated that its true nature is most fully revealed in the gift of self by the person who loves to the beloved person. Very important point. That's John Paul II's hallmark. You know, gift of self. That's going to be the big principle in theology of the body. This is going to be how we really find ourselves in the other. At the bottom of page 125, the last sentence. Love proceeds by way of this renunciation, guided by the profound conviction that it does not diminish and impoverish, but quite the contrary, enlarges and enriches the existence of the person. In other words, to give myself to another person is not going to hurt me, it's going to enlarge me. It's going to help me to realize my full self. What might be called the law of ecstasis, like ecstasy, seems to operate here. The lover goes outside the self to find a fuller existence in another. In no other form of love does this law operate so conspicuously as it does in betrothed love. There was love between two people, a man and woman, should be, in a sense, an out-of-the-body experience. But in going out of the body into the other, we realize our full self. Interesting that Eve was formed from Adam when Adam was put into a state of ecstasis, ecstasy. On the bottom then, bottom paragraph, the last paragraph on 126. For contrary to the superficial view of sex, according to which love, meaning here erotic love, culminates in a woman's surrender of her body to a man, we should rightly speak of the mutual surrender of both persons, of their belonging equally to each other. Not mutual sexual exploitation with X giving her body for Y to possess so that each can obtain the maximum sexual pleasure, but the reciprocated gift of self, So two persons belong each to the other. This is the only full and satisfactory description of betrothed love, which finds its fulfillment in marriage. In the absence of these characteristics, love is by definition impossible, and mere use, in the first and second meanings of the word, takes its place. In other words, using each other. Love cannot take the form of mere use, even if enjoyment is mutual and simultaneous. That's another thing. Well, it's okay. Whatever goes on between us, we agree with it. It's okay. No, it's not. It's still not love. Even if you agree to it, if you both like it, doesn't necessarily mean it's love. It's like two alcoholics buying a drink for each other is not friendship. Okay. Instead, it finds its proper expression in the union of persons. The result of unification is that each belongs to the other, a reality expressed in various ways. Among them, full sexual intercourse, which we shall call marital intercourse, since, as we shall see, marriage is the only proper place for it. That's one of the things I use when I'm especially talking with teenagers about, why we don't have sexual intercourse outside of marriage. It's an honesty thing. That's all. This is an action of unification. If you're not unified, I mean really unified, not just because you feel like it or say you are you unified by some external thing that says you are, such as the sacrament of marriage, the church? If you're not, then the action becomes dishonest.
That means that sex is marriage and marriage is sex.
Right, very good, yeah. Yeah, that's what it is, yeah.
And I say, you can't get married to Papa because you're not capable of sexual activity.
Exactly, yeah.
What?
Yeah. And just to show you the mystical sense and how we, one of our repeated themes here is the interdependency of celibacy and marriage is two sides of the same coin. To bring up more church policy, a man cannot be ordained a celibate priest unless he has all his parts. Why? He's not going to use them, right? It's excess baggage. I'll just get him in trouble. No. Why would that be the rule of the church? Because the body has a theology. There is a mystical meaning to your body, your sexuality. Well, no, no.
I mean, would the church, would you ask them if they plan to have sex?
Yeah.
Couples in their 80s coming in, and would you ask them that?
Yeah.
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 So unless they're capable of at least once, they're not married.
Right. No, it has to be intercourse. Yeah, that's the consummation.
They do pre-Cana? People in their 80s do pre-Cana?
Well, okay. First of all, are you presuming that this is, first of all, for the sake of discussion, are you presuming that it's a first marriage for both?
Would that even matter?
Yeah. Yeah. See, okay, two things on that.
And I'm sorry, the teams bring this stuff up. They
yeah.
get every loophole in.
They do. That's right. Okay. Two answers to that. First of all, we do things in the church also in what's called, see, part of this is our potential, like in potentia. In other words, what is your potential as a human being is also part of what you are. Okay, just like in contraception or the natural family planning. Okay, even if you're not intending for a conception, you're still giving yourself totally to each other because you're giving your potential for fertility. Even if fertility isn't going to happen, or presumably won't happen then, it's still also your potential is part of you, part of your whole package. So even with older people, there's always you get married with there's a potential, your sexuality is still part of your potential. And ideally, yes, you would try to consummate that in some way, but you also enter that marriage with the idea that you have the potential for that and the intentionality if it is possible. You don't get married because it's not possible. So it's intentionality and potentiality are part of what is the approach in the sacraments. Yeah. There is a potential for that. It may not be necessarily physically possible, but you never know. But there's always a potential, and you go into it with that potential. Just like what if a couple, friends, they know they get married and maybe they know they're not may not be able to be fruitful. The woman is, maybe the guy's younger, the woman's older, so she's past her fertility. Okay, the two still get married, and they live that marriage with mindful of the potential of fruitfulness of the two of them, meaning they would have relations with the same spirituality behind it as a married couple who could be fruitful. You know what I mean? Because you're still then living according to the sum total of who you are as a person, which includes your potential for fertility. So you still live according to that. In other words, it's more honest that way. Otherwise, you end up with using. So our potential, it's like celibate priest. I bring my potential for biological fatherhood to the priesthood, and it's a necessary requirement. Even though I will never use that potential, the potential is still part of my whole being. And a whole man is called to the priesthood. And then his potential now takes on, in practicality, a mystical fruitfulness. You're now a mystical father and mystical husband. Just as they bring their potential for motherhood and being a spouse to their vocation as celibate nuns. It's just that now they live it out in the mystical dimension, but they still bring that potential.
Or if a woman should be a nurse, and she brings her potential to the care of her
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Right.
There's a comment online of a man who's saying in his own experience when his wife had to have a hysterectomy for medical reasons, they still continue their NFT lifestyle.
Good, excellent, very
to
good.
show her that I love her.
Very
Not
good.
That we can
Right.
head into 40s without a chance of child number 6.
Excellent, very good. That's beautiful, and that is dead on. That's right on.
Natural things. So
Yeah.
they abstain 7 or 10 days a month.
Excellent. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah.
Very faulty.
Rhythm was part of it, but we know. It's the same principle, just that it's more advanced now, more accurate. There's more methodologically. Same principle, methodologically we're more advanced with it. Okay, on page 127, second paragraph at the top there, about the second sentence. The unification of the two persons must first be achieved by way of love, and sexual relations between them can only be an expression of a unification already complete. It is worth recalling here what has already been said about the objective and the subjective aspects of love. Love in its subjective aspect is always a psychological situation, an experience caused by a sexual value, and hinging on awareness of that value in the subject, or in two subjects experiencing love each for the other. Love in its objective aspect is an interpersonal fact, is reciprocity and friendship based on a shared good. It is then always unification of two persons with the result that they belong to each other. We cannot substitute two subjective loves or their sum for this objective love. The subjective and objective aspects are distinct and not interchangeable. Towards the bottom of 127, the bottom paragraph there, halfway through. Love, however, makes for unification through the reciprocal gift of self. Now, in the time remaining, I just want to hit that reciprocity a little bit harder. And so let's go to page 129. This reciprocity is a very, very important concept because it's one that's hard for us to understand in our culture, but it would make a lot of difference. In other words, the reciprocity is I get what I need only by giving to you. That's a tough one for us, but the reciprocity is a big point in his thought and in Theology of the Body. And, comes up there too, that reciprocity. It's a good principle when we start to get into the use of the naked body, like in art and the whole modesty and purity and all that stuff, that the principle of reciprocity in that. Okay, so page 129. Betrothed love comprises on the one hand the gift of the person, on the other hand, acceptance of that gift. Implicit in all this is the mystery of reciprocity. Acceptance must also be giving, and giving receiving. Love is of its nature reciprocal. He who knows how to receive knows also how to give. I am, of course, speaking of a skill, which is characteristic of love, for there is also a skill in giving and receiving, which is characteristic of egoism. The skill in giving and receiving, which is typical of love, is exhibited by the man whose attitude to a woman is informed by total affirmation of her value as a person, and equally by the woman whose attitude to a man is informed by the affirmation of his value as a person. This skill creates the specific climate of betrothed love, the climate of surrender of the innermost self. Both man and woman need this genuine capacity for affirmation of the value of the person if the gift of self is to be fully valid, and equally if acceptance of the gift is to be valid. A woman is capable of truly making a gift of herself only if she fully believes in the value of her person and in the value as a person of the man to whom she gives herself. And a man is capable of fully accepting a woman's gift of herself only if he is fully conscious of the magnitude of the gift, which he cannot be unless he affirms the value of her person. Realization of the value of the gift awakens the need to show gratitude and to reciprocate in ways which would match its value. We can also see here how essential it is for betrothed love, a love which is a reciprocal giving of self, to contain the inner structure of friendship. In other words, it's this. We find ourselves by giving ourselves away. But in order to give ourselves away, in other words, you can't give what you don't have. You have to first possess yourself. You have to have the value of your own person. Only then can you give yourself away. Otherwise, it's called codependency or victimhood. A lot of times it scares people when we start talking like this. So they're thinking, oh, what about me? I'm just giving myself to him. It's going to be all about him or her. What about me? A natural, understandable reaction. It's not about just giving yourself away recklessly. It's about possessing yourself and giving yourself as gift and receiving that person as gift.
I look at an image of Jesus at the Last Supper washing the disciples' feet.
Yes.
And he said, "You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right. And here I am. I'm the teacher and the Lord, and I'm washing the feet like a slave." He's not washing the feet because he's a doormat. He's the master.
Right.
Washing their feet and then telling them
right.
to do the same.
He was fully in possession of himself as master, and because of that, he could be servant.
I think it starts with knowing who you are.
Yes.
In Christ, like
exactly.
that knowledge. It's almost like a quest, to find yourself.
Right.
But you do have to understand
and
that knowledge of who you are as a man, as a woman.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's true. It has, in other words, it kind of relates to when they say art, love is an art. To love is there's an art to it. There is. You do have to learn it. I know for my own life. I think of, all the reading and spiritual formation I do in my own life. Growing up in seminary, continually as a priest. I'm always trying to sort of like, hone my craft of loving. It is a skill, really. It's like, yeah, it's an act of will, and there is an art to it. There really is an art to loving. It's like the song, the Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler. Know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to run. Really, that was a very profound song, actually. But truly, in my own life, and we see in our world today, we see there was, it was, okay, they did the peace, love, and rock and roll, peace, love, and everything. But we're like, okay, that's one part of it, but there's also another part of love too. So, you have to hone that to know when to have the peace, love, and kindness, and when to, have the tougher love and so on, in that whole balance. You quoted scripture, sister, and you notice Christ said, "I am Lord and Master." So you see, there was and. Okay, we're one more thing then of this reciprocity. Okay, if I could just, and then we'll go. On page 130 and 131, two paragraphs here I just want to look at because they're real zingers. And then for next time, by the way, what I want to get into is, you can continue reading this book. We'll finish it, but I'd like you to read, if you want to read ahead, start the chapter on the person and chastity. So we'll be in May. Things are going to start to warm up here. Okay, on page 130, nowhere else in the whole book, perhaps, is its title, Love and Responsibility, more to the point than it is here. There exists in love a particular responsibility, the responsibility for a person who is drawn into the closest possible partnership in the life and activity of another. It becomes, in a sense, the property of whoever benefits from this gift of self. It follows that one also has a responsibility for one's own love. Is it mature and complete enough to justify the enormous trust in another person? The hope that giving oneself will not mean losing one's own soul. On the contrary, enlarging one's existence, or will it end in disillusionment? Responsibility for love clearly comes down to responsibility for the person, originates in it, and returns to it. That is what makes it such an immense responsibility. Okay, and then page 131 at the top in italics. The greater the feeling of responsibility for the person, the more true love there is. In that final paragraph to end on 131. This truth throws a great deal of light on the problem of choice. We have not forgotten that when love between a man and woman takes its natural course, they give themselves each to the other, become each other's property. Before the love can take on its definitive form, become betrothed love, the man and the woman each face the choice of the person on whom to bestow the gift of self. Its consequence makes the choice a weighty matter. To choose a person is also to opt for betrothed love, for the reciprocal gift of self. The object of choice is another person, but it is as though one were choosing another I. Isn't that amazing? Choosing oneself in another, choosing oneself in another, and the other in oneself. Only if it is objectively good for two persons to be together can they belong to each other. And that's a hot one for how many people I tell. I know you're attracted. I know you feel good together. I know you all this stuff, but you know what? Objectively speaking, maybe you are not meant to be together in a betrothed love. Very, very common discernment that should go on. Despite what you feel, it may in fact objectively not be what you should do. Maybe Father Albert Coutier. Well, yeah, in other words, a couple is married, and one of them meets somebody, and they're attracted to that person. Very, very attracted. Just because you are attracted doesn't mean, well, we belong together because we're right for each other. How can we deny these feelings? They're real. Therefore, we must be with each other. You know who Father Albert Coutier is? I bring him up. Okay. Hope to have him on my radio program, actually. I like to talk to him. He was on Alvin Radio. Al Cresta interviewed him on Alvin Radio. He was apparently a popular radio show host in Florida area, and he dealt with his whole talk. They called him the Oprah. Yeah. Yeah, Coutier, Alberto Coutier. I think he's of Cuban descent. He was a very popular, dynamic, charismatic priest that was on this talk show. And in fact, they called him something like the Oprah of the priesthood or something like that, like relational talk call-in show. Well, he gets caught on a beach with a girl. So one thing led to another, and he left the church, and he's a priest in the Anglican church married to this girl. And he's just come out with a book called Dilemma. In fact, he was interviewed on Fox News. I'm trying to get hold of the book, by the way. I haven't found it yet. I'm going to read it before I'd like to interview and talk with him. But anyway, I just bring him up because he's an example that's been out there in the public. And there would be a situation where, if presuming his vocation was true, okay, let's presume that. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe he was meant to really be, I don't know. But he still wants to be a priest because he's an Anglican priest, married Anglican priest. Okay, let's assume his vocation was true. He meets this girl, and he talks about how I just knew when I saw her, it was right, and all that, the whole stuff, It's in the interview I heard this. I haven't read the book yet. Okay, that's when this principle would apply. You always love at first sight. It's just hot passion, all kinds of electricity, and everything feels right. It feels right. Why should we deny it? We're not being honest if we deny it. We're meant for each other. We love each other. No. Okay, I don't deny all that feeling. But you got to bring in, again, the objective truth. The objective truth is you are a committed man. You already are a married man. And that's the point Al Cresta made in his interview with him. You were already, in a sense, married to the church. You were not a free man. And that should have taken precedent. Al kind of took him to task. I have a little different approach on this. I have a recording of the interview. If I give Sister, maybe I'll get some copies if you want to hear it. It's kind of telling. But this is where the principle would apply of, despite what is felt and seems right, the objective truth has to dominate. And I think for a lot of priests who left when they experienced something like he did, I don't know how much of this kind of counseling they got, or if they even listened to it. And they could have gotten it, but they just didn't listen. And so this is a very, very important principle. Does that answer your sister? That's a good example? You're asking for an example. Okay. Okay. Okay, last sentence in that second paragraph, then we'll end. Love is impossible for beings who are mutually impenetrable. Only the spirituality and the inwardness of persons create the conditions for mutual interpenetration, which enables each to live in and by the other. Okay, we'll pick this up next time. Like I said, read that next chapter, but we'll finish this one as well when we get back. The chapter is month. Chapter 3, the person and chastity, begins on page 143. The sections, the person and chastity, on page 143.
Welcome to our new people. Is everybody on my email list who wants to be? Yes. We email the notes to you. We also post them online. I'll let you know what other fields you find stuff. canceled. It's very rare that we can cancel the show.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's every second Saturday of the month, September through June.
Yeah, in the summer months, I hope you stay with us because we're going to really get into some. Just gets better and better.
May and June, and then we break July, August.
Yeah, I think we did, didn't we? Yeah.
Like we're not.
Yeah. Bring on. We're on the Rome schedule. Everything shuts down in August. Rome.